Ross. Thanks for having me. Yeah, really great to be here today. And I wasn't aware of what you guys are doing, sort of these weekly sessions, and just been so impressed by it when I was doing a bit of research beforehand. So it's great these things are happening. And yeah, pleased to be here. But my name is Max. I've worked in the social innovation space for the past year on a program called Year Here, and that is sort of intended to try and raise, I guess, the next crop of social entrepreneurs. It sounds very grandiose, but it isn't. So in that time, I've worked at a charity. I've consulted for Camden Council, and I'm now trying to build my own venture around today's topic, which obviously is no code. I'll just let you know as well. I'll be popping in lots of links in the chat, so hopefully they'll be useful. So just keep an eye out. But I guess I'll address sort of the elephant in the room. I know a few of you look like you know what it is, but majority look like they didn't. So what actually is no code is probably a good place to start. So there are multiple definitions. So there's some from creating software without code to tools that make building websites, apps, and software simple, and to sort of the other end, which is tools that allow you to create technology solutions with no programming experience. So the bottom line from this is basically now anyone can build their own ideas and improve their existing processes, because no code is essentially democratized software creation. So it's sort of akin to when phones sort of gave rise to citizen journalists. Now we're probably seeing the dawn of citizen developers. So people like me and you, I've come from a very non-technical background, and now am able to build very cool things. It's seeing the dawn of sort of democratizing access to everyone, which is exciting. And just to give you an example of the power that these tools have, just the other day, I saw a small business who couldn't afford to pay for Zoom every month, literally build a replica, obviously a watered down version, but a replica of Zoom for their own internal video conferencing software, which has saved them quite a lot of money since then. So that's just quite an interesting example that hopefully gives you a taste for actually, wow, that's quite an impressive thing to be able to do without any programming or coding experience. So now I'll just quickly go over some of the core concepts or principles behind no code and what it entails as you build with it. So firstly, the user interface builder. So basically it's drag and drop. So you can make websites and apps and even automate processes by simply dragging and dropping different components that you want on that page or site or app. So that may be a header or an image, or even a chat function within the app, and you simply drag and drop it. And what comes down to you is obviously the visual layout and that sort of thing, but the actual sort of functional aspect of it, i.e. putting something that works on a page, is done for you, which I think is quite exciting and very intuitive, again, for people from completely non-technical backgrounds. And then the second concept, similarly to the drag and drop interface, is visual modeling, so or visual programming. So it's essentially you're making things work, but visually. So you're not writing any code, but you're connecting visual components together on a page, which makes it easier and more enjoyable to actually create things, at least from my sort of personal experience. And then the third, I guess, like core principle of no code is reusability. So once you've made a component or you've added a component, you can reuse it and remix it. So there's sort of a quote, sort of fast development is great, but not developing at all is even better. And once you've made something, you can just reuse it. And that is another really useful thing to have, especially for the speed of development in this space. And then lastly, just to come on to the last principle of no code, which is integration. So it's great you can hook up your apps that you make to other apps. And I think what will be touched on later is Zapier, which you can connect different apps to and with to create automations and sort of add another layer of functionality to your apps. But those are sort of four things that I see as being key to no code, but that's by no means exhaustive, but hopefully that gives you a good understanding of its sort of identity and its principles behind it. Cool. So in terms of what this all means, it basically means that you can now develop things at speed and with ease of use, which is great, and saves you from having to learn to code, at least for what you'll be using it for. So that's given you hopefully a bit of context on the power of it, of no code and what it's about. But I guess what's really important today, and I think will be touched on later, is how charities can apply it to leverage this technology for your organisations. And I've identified 5 ways no code can help charities. And again, this is by no means exhaustive, but something that I've come across in my experience. So firstly, I think it can be a great technology to digitize your service offering for a more diversified and inclusive service delivery. So now you can create almost disposable apps according to use case, and websites and chatbots to integrate into your site or your service delivery to make it more accessible for more people. And what I'll do is I'll just add a couple of resources in the chat now. So LandBot is one where you can make easy chatbots to communicate maybe with your user base. And then another one is Glide, which is a app that is powered by spreadsheets, so Google Sheets, and you can again make disposable apps for your users for different use cases with it. And then lastly, cards.co, I'll pop in the chat as well, which is another one great for making quick landing pages that you may need for specific events that you're running or something like that. But that's the first sort of use case I've identified. And then the next one would be probably the most important, which is automating your processes. So streamlining manual tasks like sharing content across your social media to sending new beneficiaries a personal email, or adding their contact information to a spreadsheet. These things are all typically manual tasks, but with no code, they can be done in the background without you ever having to worry about them, which is obviously great. And what I would recommend you do as a charity is to almost get all your staff to work out all the manual processes that they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and then identify some of the things they're doing that can be automated with no code, and I'm sure from that you'll be able to save a hell of a lot of time, money, and actually will improve consistency of the work you're doing, because it's automated and doing it in the background, sort of according to a strict set of instructions. So now I'll move on to the third use case of no code for charities, which is being able to evidence your impact more strongly through better data capture as a way to make more data-driven decisions, but also to represent the sort of great work that you're doing to funders. And you can do that using a couple of tools that come to mind. There's a one called Veyu, which I'll chuck in the chat now, which allows you to visualize your data and charts and graphs very easily, and by uploading your data sets to it. And then the second one is Airtable, which you may have heard of because it's reasonably sort of mainstream now, but is another one that you can visualize your data from. So that is the third reason, the third way. Then fourthly, marketing your services. I guess no code doesn't really get mentioned much in a marketing context, but there's some really good tools that you can use, again, to leverage this technology for your marketing of your service that you offer. And here's an article that gives the lowdown on the best 20 also no-code tools for marketing. And then lastly, I think it's a great way, no code, to modernize your image to be more attractive as an organization. I think I came across a quote recently that 75% of young donors are turned off by out-of-date websites. So that's quite an important consideration, I think, and you can make very visually sort of attractive websites with tools such as Webflow, which I've just added to the chat, and also Card, which I've added to the chat before. So those are the five sort of things I think no code can really help charities with, but I'm sure there are others. So hopefully that's giving you a bit more sort of excitement as to the potential that these tools have. And now I'll just move on to actually how you can now apply this sort of knowledge to your organization. So you know what use cases they have, but now you're probably thinking, well, how do I add that to my organization? So firstly, I'd recommend just reading these resources that I've put together. I'll pop these in the chat, and they're 5 articles that will get you up to speed very quickly on the no-code space and landscape. And that is something that lots of other people have done before when they're starting out, is read these 5. So I'd highly recommend doing that first. And then secondly, so the venture that I'm working on, we run a Tech for Good program, which connects no coders with charities and other social impact organizations. And you can apply for help from these no coders here. Sorry, I'm bombarding the chat with stuff, but yeah, you can apply for help from sort of no coders with the link just dropped. And then there's the next thing you can do, as I'd probably say that the Tech for Good program is a little bit of a one-time fix. It's not necessarily a long-term solution for your charity if you really have serious intentions of sort of embedding it in your organisations. So basically, I'd always say you should invest in your staff and to maybe upskill them in this technology. And I guess that just sort of goes back to that whole give a man a fish sort of quote. And I guess that brings me on to what I'm doing, which is 100 Days of No Code, which is basically a program that helps people learn to no code in 100 days, and be very happy to talk to anyone that's interested in maybe going through that program and sort of reaping the rewards that no code could give. And I'll just pop in another link to that membership that we have, so you can check that out. And then if you're not convinced or you want to hear more about no code, and just chat about how it could help your organisations, and taking free one-on-one sort of informal chats over the next week to talk all things no code. So please feel free to book a slot in my Calendly that I'll just add here as well. And yeah, that's me. You can also reach me on my personal Twitter and ask me any questions on that if you have any. But yeah, thanks for listening.
Brilliant, thanks, Max. That was really useful. Yeah, I think one of the things that people struggle a lot with no code is when you search for tools to carry out really specific things, what you're thrown back is just an overwhelming range of options, and actually knowing where to start is sometimes the most difficult bit, never mind kind of starting to embed that confidence. I think that's one of the things, like for everyone that's on this call, is really to think the tools that Max is describing, you're not going to break the internet. Even if in one of those tools you change something fundamentally, that ability to roll back really quickly. So again, it's just thinking about that relationship that you've got with digital, where trying to build that culture of exploration in your team and trying some of these things. And actually with all these tools that Max has mentioned, you can try them in that sandbox environment before you actually publish anything as well. So we're not talking about putting something live and then tinkering with it as we go. So next speaker we are going to hear from is Iain Delworth from the Lens, and he's going to be talking about Zapier, isn't it, Iain, that you're going to be talking about?
I've got a nice practical example following on from Max.
Sure.
I've got some slides just to kind of help go through that, if that's okay.
Yep. Siobhan, can I quickly check, how do the slides work with closed captioning? Can I just double check that?
So yeah, because it's closed caption as opposed to subtitles, the closed captioner will describe the slides as well as we go, so that's
cool.
Fine.
Perfect.
If there's a link to the slides, that really helps anyone with accessibility problems because they can open them on their own browser.
Okay.
I can do that. It's not letting me share it though. Is that because I need some permission?
Oh. What kind, is it on Google Slides?
It's just, I've just got it on PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, but it's coming up unknown at the moment.
You can send,
So
I mean, even if we don't do it in real time, you could send it afterwards, or did you have a solution that will help us now?
I've just made Iain a co-host, so if you want to try and share again.
Cool. The joys. No, it doesn't seem to be working. Right. I'll just get started. Well, I think I need to do a few things in the background.
Okay. No worries.
So I need to quit, so I'll do that later. That's fine. So basically, I work at the Lens. The Lens is all about delivering innovation through entrepreneurship. And what does entrepreneurship mean? It's where frontline staff have the skills, confidence, permission to act like an entrepreneur inside their organisation. So I just kind of want to provide a bit of context just now, just to kind of explain why we started using Zapier and how we plan to use it. So we went from pre-crisis delivering 18-month-long culture change programs. They're all based face-to-face delivery. We would go in and work with large organisations like Alzheimer's Scotland, Loretto Care, children's hospitals across Scotland, and deliver lots and lots of workshops, talk to lots of staff all across the organisation at all different levels. Obviously, Crisis happens, totally changed. None of that was not a viable business model anymore. So we had to rapidly shift, and within the space of a week, we launched 3 new services. And that was aimed at the public and third sector, trying to help them respond. All about developing new ideas. Lots of people were scrabbling around, like we were, trying to figure out what do we do and how do we kind of help the people that we're meant to be supporting. So we launched Power Hours, which kind of one-on-one support sessions, learning groups where we got together a kind of cohort of people to work on a specific problem. But then we also launched our Lens Labs. So those are 90-minute workshops, free to attend, and on a kind of variety of different topics. This actually proved really, really popular. We had lots of them were sold out, and now what we're doing is we're kind of starting to shift away from responding to the crisis and now starting to think about how is our business model changed from now on. We're seeing this as a key marketing tool. We've actually generated a number of leads for paid business as a result of it, because we operate we're a registered charity, but we're a social enterprise. So we've got a kind of variety of different ones. We've got resilience in times of change, we've got storytelling for influence, creative problem solving. And one of the hallmarks of our facilitation is that we send a visual record at the end of every workshop, whether that's face-to-face or digital. And that's it's just a summary of the learning. It's some of the slides, some of the kind of key points that the facilitator is going through. So all of our developers who deliver training, they would just send it on afterwards. But what we are now doing is we've integrated Eventbrite with MailerLite, which is our MailChimp version. It's like a email marketing platform using Zapier. I've got a lovely graphic that kind of shows you a list, but I'll send a link to the slides after. But what the integration does in Zapier is connect the attendees. So once you've attended the workshop, you basically join a mailing list on the MailerLite. What I've then built in is whenever someone joins that mailing list and they've got a particular tag, so storytelling for influence or resilience in times of change, they then get automatically sent an email, a nicely designed email, and it links to the visual record that they can download. So why do this? Kind of 4 reasons really. It saves time and money. There is roughly, I think I've calculated, it's about 4 days worth of work over the course of a year with the number of labs that we're doing. But that's just one specific lab. Once we start, we're going to be delivering lots of training over the course of the next year, hopefully. So that's a lot of time and a lot of money that we can be spent elsewhere. It also improves the user experience and is a consistent user experience. So we've got 4 developers, they'll all send slightly different emails, they'll all be slightly formatted, they'll send it at different times, but consistency is really important for the user experience and our brand reputation. So those are the kind of main reasons that we're doing it. What we're planning on doing next, so that's quite a simple, quite straightforward one. I'm on and off furlough, so once I've got a bit more time, we're going to do something a bit more complex. So we've got the basic kind of premise of marketing is around getting the right message to the right person at the right time. We've got specific questions when you buy a ticket on Eventbrite. So what sector are you from? Are you public, private or thirds? And how would you describe your role? Front line, middle manager, senior leader. So there's 9 variations, 9 types of people that we can that can come along to our Eventbrite. So what we'll be doing is then you can match up the specific questions to your Eventbrite to your MailChimp or MailerLite list, and then what you can do is then create rules as a result of those. So those that so everyone will get the visual record, but then a week later, if you are a senior leader in a public sector organisation, you will get your own email. If you're frontline staff in a private sector organisation, you'll get your own email. If you're a middle manager in the third sector, you'll get your own email. You kind of get the gist. The point is that allows me to, one, sell them a specific product. So if you're attending storytelling, we do an open course for storytelling. We do, you can buy it for your teams, or you can buy it for your senior leaders. We do ideation workshops. We do lots of different things, so I can be very specific and very targeted in what I'm trying to upsell from that free service. I can change the language. Private sector talk very, very different to the third sector, as we all know, and so on. So there's lots of little variations. There's 9 emails that we'll be doing, and that is just really going to help us up our game in marketing, because we've moved from that big 18-month culture change program that we've talked to senior leaders and they're the ones who purchase it. Now we've got frontline staff like yourselves, like anyone basically can come along and purchase something from the lens and help in their entrepreneurship journey. So that's basically in a nutshell what we're doing. I think what I would say is that that's me scratching the surface. I think I started to do a wee bit because there was a question earlier, I'm not sure who it was from, but that was a specific problem that I was looking to solve. But then I was kind of looking and faffing around and kind of doing it because I don't have much experience in this with this. And there's absolute tons of stuff. And it can be a bit overwhelming, but I think actually, particularly at the moment with the team on and off furlough, the efficiency savings for me that's pretty exciting, to be able to just get rid of that repetitive side of things just is quite powerful. So that's a very specific example from myself. That's
brilliant, Ian. Thanks so much. Are you sharing a room with someone who's typing away there, or was there?
No.
No, there was a kind of typing noise in the background.
Right, okay.
Ian is either in a room with someone or is the most amazing multitasker that has ever existed.
Yeah, I'm doing some work. I love efficiency. No, I think I was kind of like flicking between my sides.
There we go. I thought there was someone typing away. I thought it was a really good example actually, and just sometimes it's not overcomplicating these things. It's thinking about if we want to get really personalised messaging to people, but we know that's going to be a massive time sink. How do we automate some of that stuff? Yeah. It's really, really, really nice example. It may be quite good actually when we come on to the discussion is maybe to think about aspirationally, are there things that you're looking to do that maybe require a bit more thought and a bit more integration, maybe thinking about what that looks like in the future. So maybe pick that up when we come to the Q&A section. So we are now going to hear from Lizzie Wrobel from Ryder. Lizzie is still about, there you are Lizzie, sorry, I have to look through all the multiple small screens. Lizzie's going to talk a wee bit to us about how she uses integration and how she uses those no-code principles as well.
Thanks, Ross. Hi, everyone. I'm Lizzie Wrobel. I'm the head of digital at Ryder. For those of you who don't know what Ryder do, we provide palliative, neurological and bereavement support. So we have 7 hospices and palliative care centres and 4 neurological care centres. And we also provide bereavement support face-to-face through our centres, but also now we have a number of online services as well. We have an online bereavement community and we have a newish service where we offer people up to 6 sessions of counselling with a qualified counsellor to help them deal with their grief and their bereavement. So that's kind of Ryder in a nutshell. My example is quite similar to Ian's, really. So around 3 years ago, when we were starting to realise what GDPR was going to mean for our mailing lists, we needed a new way of getting data and building our supporter mailing lists. And our best supporters are our warm supporters, and those are people who come in to our centres and into our services. So what we wanted to do was set up a way of capturing that data and capturing people's email addresses so that we could send them on some kind of fairly generic journey and then drop them at the end of that into our general mailing lists and start to build up sending our regular comms to them. So we used to have paper sign-in books in our centres. So when you go in and visit someone at reception, you fill out your name, you say who you're visiting, you say what time you arrived and what time you left. And we replaced those with iPads. What we couldn't do was MailChimp is our email broadcast system that we use, and there wasn't a form that we could reasonably use from that in a format on an iPad that meant people wouldn't be able to just then generally get on the internet or come out of the app or anything, and and all of that kind of thing. So we needed a visitor sign-in app specifically. We piloted with one called Envoy, and we ended up using one called Team Go, but I think we might go back to Envoy now because it's much better than it used to be. But we needed then something to sit in between the visitor sign-in app and MailChimp, and that was Zapier. So Zapier sits exactly in the middle of those two, and the process is that if someone comes into the hospice, they fill out on the iPad, they fill their information out. They can choose to leave their email address. They don't have to. But if they do leave their email address, what happens is then all of the form submissions are sent to Zapier. Zapier will then filter out all of the ones where people have left an email address. And then that information is pushed through to the relevant hospice mailing list in MailChimp. And I think it's within about 10 or 15 minutes of someone signing in, they will then get the first email, which is a kind of welcome from the centre director and outlining what services it is that we offer and whether we can kind of be any more help. We wanted something that was going to be instant. Comes back to Iain's points again, kind of if it's quite easy to set up kind of forms that people can fill out, but then if there's a massive manual effort for that, and we probably in a month in one of our centres maybe have around 800 to 1,000 visitors, so it's a massive amount of data to be kind of dealing with, and we wanted it to be timely and for people to start receiving that contact from us in a timely fashion, which was one of the main benefits from it, really. And it's worked really very well. I think, like Iain, we're not using it in a particularly sophisticated way, but it's doing the job. And if anything ever falls over, never tends to fall over on the Zap side, it tends to fall over from the app side or the MailChimp side. We get alerts straight away when something's not looking right. And I'm a head of digital, but I'm one of those not hugely technical heads of digital. I come from more of a comms background, and I can just, I didn't set it up, but I can now kind of find my way around it. You can look at how the other ones were set up, try and kind of troubleshoot and work out what's broken, what doesn't look like the other one that's still working, kind of thing. Yeah, it's been great for us. It's been really good. And that's probably about it. It's not a hugely complicated solution. And it was not quite a lot of effort to set up. There was more effort across the whole process as a whole, which is a whole different session. But you kind of set it up, and then that's it. It just kind of ticks along and works in the background, and you almost forget that it's there doing a job until one of the other apps isn't doing their job and we get an alert come through.
Yeah, that's a brilliant overview, Lizzie. Thank you so much for that. Could you mention the name of the forms tool again? I don't know if Jen, if you managed to grab a note of that or the link.
They're kind of visitor management apps.
Right, okay.
So we have used Envoy. I can put them in the chat.
Okay.
We used Envoy to pilot. We didn't like some stuff about it, and because it's an app, they're like, yeah, we'll add it to the roadmap, and then they never do. So we switched to one called Team Go, and now I think we might switch back to Envoy, because I think we can probably get it for free, whereas Team Go has a cost associated with it, whereas I think we can get away with the free version of Envoy now, including being able to have webhooks through to other apps.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I think we mentioned it previously in one of the calls, but Street Soccer Scotland, I mean, that was one of the biggest changes they made in terms of how the processes work, was just a single form. And I think for a lot of people on this call is don't underestimate the power of that single form and getting that right, both to save you time, but that potential to do much, much more. So the fact that Lizzie can now have a connection and can convert someone from being a visitor to being a supporter to the organisation, which you couldn't do easily in a paper-based form. So Street Soccer, and their biggest bugbear is staff. So people who are managing like football classes, usually for people experiencing homelessness, usually around Glasgow area, they do some work in Dundee as well. And they were having to carry kind of paper-based forms, get people to fill them out on a pitch before they could even start a session. And then they were having to drive to an office to go and manually put that stuff on a computer. They now use a system called Pronto Forms, which is specifically designed for kind of being out in the field. So if you've got kind of remote services, or you've got staff who are not always next to the computer, that system's designed for that, and that integrates the same way that Zapier does in your system, Lizzie. It integrates with their Salesforce CRM database. So as soon as that's filled out, it automatically inputs to the CRM. So it's stripped out about something like 7 steps in their process were just removed instantly by using those two tools in tandem with each other, and it's just saved a huge amount of time. But importantly, that's allowed football coaches to be football coaches again, rather than football coaches, but now 20% of their time is doing admin work. So again, it's just thinking about, this is not about cost savings for staff, but it's about your staff doing the job that they enjoy doing and that they wanted to do in the first place.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that we do still have more manual aspects to the data handling further down the line, because we use Razor's Edge as our CRM. We don't hold data in MailChimp. So once people have come out of the journey, that data is taken out of MailChimp, it's uploaded into RE. And then that's where the data is then pulled from for any future mailings, and gets uploaded back. But it's the big manual element at the beginning that we've managed to take out. And also we got rid of paper books, which are definitely not GDPR compliant. So.
Yeah. And it's sometimes nice, actually, when you're thinking about these tools, so those kind of principles that Max mentioned and the examples we're hearing, is thinking about what's the real sticking point, whether it's in your physical office or whether it's remotely. What's the bit in your processes that everyone hates? So it can be things like toil. Usually most places, toil is a thing where someone vaguely has an idea of how much they've got. They have to speak to their line manager. Their line manager has no idea. They speak to another person. You're then given 2 Word documents that you have to fill out. You fill these things out. They go back to another person. Then about a week later, you're told how much toil you've got, which is kind of ridiculous when there's plenty of off-the-shelf tools that are going to allow you to find that stuff just by logging into your own staff portal. So again, it's just thinking about where are those pain points in your organisation, how might some of these tools help you with that. So Russell Findlay said, holiday and toil, try Timetastic, apparently, which is an excellent name. So Timetastic, there's a good tip from Russell in the chat there. Okie dokie. So we're on to our final speaker, which is Russell. So it's Russell Findlay from Speakers Trust. Russell's going to be talking a wee bit how they're using flexible technology.
Thank you, Russ. I think probably the first and most important thing is that if you can mail merge, or anybody in your team can use mail merge, then you can use all the tools that have been mentioned so far. And it gives you the power to do so much more than you've been able to do just with that. It also means all of the headaches of mail merge, like the Excel export and all of that stuff, disappears. The first time I came across Zapier was when I had a problem, which I think a number of nonprofits will have, is we had spent £50,000 on a legacy system before I joined, had £15,000 of support costs a year. That did a job that was really good, a repetitive job of sending invoices from that system into QuickBooks and managing our finances. The system couldn't be expanded or developed without that developer doing more work. And that really, really frustrated me. So the first time I found Zapier was when I was really angry, trying to work out why Salesforce couldn't just talk to QuickBooks. And then what I discovered was not only could it do that, but we didn't have to buy any system. We didn't have to make a choice that was there forever. And we knew our ongoing costs. We knew our ongoing costs would always be structured about the amount of work we did. So we had Salesforce, that a lot of nonprofits will have because the licenses are free. And we had QuickBooks, which again is a cheap accounting system. We needed those two things to talk to each other because we run 1,500 workshops a year and we run about 60 events with speakers, VIPs, audience members, etc. And one of the key things was managing all of those processes. The one I was frustrated by was how we could invoice our clients and how we could receive invoices from our trainers. That meant we had no manual handling of any invoices. What I liked about Zapier and the way that worked is it fitted with everything that's in my IT philosophy, which is we have no IT department, we have no IT staff, We have no system purchasers. We use no code. And we empower the team to use off-the-shelf software as much as we possibly can, so we get the most out of that. You've had it explained already in a way, but all Zapier does is talk to one system, ask it a bunch of questions about the information it holds, and tell that a different system that information. So for us, our program staff could set up an invoice for a workshop, or our trainers external to the organization could fill in a simple form and send an invoice through. The key data is held, transferred into QuickBooks, and authorized on the spot. So it made those two systems talk together. That saved us a ton of money. It also saved us in the entire process. What we use end-to-end in that is a form system called Form Titan, which is really cool if you have Salesforce, because it can suck in information from Salesforce as well as sending it out. So you create bespoke forms for every single customer or account or whatever you have. Then we went into Salesforce, sent it straight to QuickBooks. That was one of our challenges. But what that opened out was, because of Zapier, and it's connected to like 2,000 different apps, we could start looking at every other aspect of where we have processes that need one system to talk to another. And when we say system, email is the most important system that we have. So Microsoft Outlook. So rather than sending stuff from Salesforce, which could get blocked within people's filters or goes from the account of the person logged in, we can create an account that most of our mail goes from. And that came into its own when we had to set up, as I think Iain was talking about, a whole range of digital processes to take our work online. And the really important bit is we had no idea what those processes were when we started building them. We had an idea of what our online event would be, and it's taking place in about 2 hours' time. But what we hadn't worked out was, what are all the interactions along the way with every school, every parent, every student that we work with, every person who's going to attend it. But what Zapier meant we could do was stitch that together in real time to make sure we could deliver. So we use a number of systems to bring that together. First of all, things we've already got, and I think my advice would always be start with what you're using, start with what you've got. So entry through into a form that connects a record in Airtable, which is basically spreadsheet on steroids. If you're not already using Google Sheets, Airtable is a far better way to manage your data than that. That would then take people through a series of automated emails. So all my team needed to do was tick a checkbox in that database as and when people move through that process. That would send them the right email at the right time. One of the hassles for us was we had Zoom that we needed to use for people to attend meetings and or webinars. And we, for safeguarding reasons, needed to take people through quite a rigmarole of getting on there. Being able to import every Zoom event you set up automatically through Zapier into your database so you can send out personalized emails with the right link to the right people was really, really useful. The other highlight was we do communication skills, public speaking, so entering is actually sending a really large file to us. What we discovered was Dropbox, brilliant system to be able to request files. So there's a URL, you can upload as big a file as you want. But what we also had was Dropbox can be connected into Airtable via Zapier. So all of those files had their Dropbox linked associated with the person who'd sent it immediately. So within a few weeks, without actually knowing the processes up front, we were able to stitch together every piece of software we wanted to use in a process which was managing the communications through that time for students and others. And I think that is one, and it sort of touched on what a couple of people have said before, but the agility to change. So Lizzie talked about changing providers of each piece of it. If you are using different systems that you may find something else works better than having a tool like Zapier, and there are a couple of others, that can integrate from anything to anything, means that you're not wedded to each system, which means you can change your mind. It means that you can have different people supporting over time, and it means you have no expensive upfront cost. So that's our experience.
That's brilliant, Russell. Thank you. Yeah, just like such a nice example. Jen's been putting some of the links that you've mentioned into chat as well. Another tool that Jen's mentioned, I don't know why everything online has to have a ridiculous name, but it's called PySync. But just a really simple tool that's about syncing data. So Zapier has lots and lots of integrations and lots of ways that you can use it, but just that simplicity of being able to sync data between two systems. I really liked your example of syncing Zoom contact information with your CRM as well. Really, really nice example.
Yeah, and I think with that, Ross, we effectively bypass the existing CRM. So Salesforce can be quite cumbersome to develop. But using Airtable meant you're effectively managing something that looks and feels like a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And the other part to it is anything any of our less digitally savvy staff saw was literally checking a box, or we used Trello for like things to do list, which was a shared list that automatically updated from any action anybody took on the way. So all people could sit with is their Trello board or a shared Trello board sitting on their computer and moving things across that. Everything I think any of us have talked about, there's always further steps, but a really important bit is just start with the first step of that process, automate piece by piece, and you'll learn the next bit you can automate and make the biggest advantage, rather than trying to specify your entire process end to end, and then work out that it didn't work in a nice seamless way after the fact. And that's, I think, where the necessity of trying to take a new process online really, really quickly helped us, because we didn't have time to work out what it was before we started. So I think we did it in a far more agile way.
Brilliant. Yeah, and as everything that we've kind of spoken about in these calls is starting to figure out where are these recipes working for other organisations. So if you know another organisation that's using Airtable and Zoom in combination, how do you take that and how do you lift that, and being able to experiment a wee bit within that as well. I thought it'd be good now to open up any questions or points from the room. So it could be questions about specific tools, or it could be a specific use case you've got in your organisation that you're struggling with. Or maybe you've got that kind of big hulking expensive legacy system that Russell mentioned, and you're looking for more nimble ways of working, more nimble systems. So any questions?
Yeah, I've got,
go for it, Peter.
If I may. It's just an open question, really. How do people deal with, so obviously using third-party platforms for things like sign-up forms and those, that's personal data or confidential data that's being shared. How did you kind of assess that and get the business comfortable with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Anyone want to pick that up? So Lizzie, Max, Russell, Iain?
I'm happy to pick that up from our perspective. So Ryder is a big organisation, and you can't just bring systems in under the radar. And especially where they are dealing with data, it has to go through our kind of a number of compliance checks. We have to fill out forms about digital privacy, why we need to use that particular piece of software and so on. So that was one thing that I kind of didn't cover, but I was thinking after I stopped talking, as is always the way, but the governance side of it, for us, adding in any new system is not just that, oh brilliant, there's something we can use, let's just start using it. Depending on the size of your organisation and how much, I don't want to say red tape because that sounds a bit negative, but the systems and processes that are in place to keep your supporters' data secure. And at Ryder we have a lot of those. There were kind of a number of internal hoops to jump through that had nothing to do with the technology necessarily or getting the technology set up, but it did still take some time to go through the kind of compliance paperwork side of things on our side.
Russell, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I think both privacy and safeguarding are right at the top. In a way, we're probably at the opposite end of the extreme to Lizzie, that we're a small organisation and can rapidly assess any new system and their privacy rules and how that data, how we're going to use that system, how and when the data will sit with them, and what privacy policy, etc. they have. We rely a little bit on one of our trustees from the more legal perspective. But I think I have a brother who works in data security who would always tell me is that the system you use is the least likely thing to be the problem within data security. It's the people using it, how it's used, and it's people having their password as password 123. So there's also that element of knowing what the worst could happen, but trying to build the safety around your data. And I'm not sure that the biggest issue will be is whether you're using, Airtable or this form or that form, particularly where you start hearing them a lot. And I think that's one of the things people have referred to similar tools quite a bit. And none of us charities, or most of us charities, won't be at the leading edge of any technology. So the beautiful thing is there's a lot of organizations that have tested that beforehand. So personally, I wouldn't try anything that I didn't know other people had used and had some form of track record.
Peter, can I ask, Bernardo's, do you use tools like Zapier or if this then that?
So when we started in the WhatsApp pilot that we ran, that we talked about in one of these calls, the first prototype version we built was Google Form into a Google Sheet using Zapier to trigger email alerts and those kind of things. We didn't actually go with that. We piloted it very briefly, but we had more time than we anticipated, so we built something a bit more high fidelity. But it worked perfectly fine. It was more of a kind of branding consideration than anything else.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions from the room? I'd be interested to know, are there people who have had this on the radar but maybe haven't gone down the road of using tools like this before? Does anyone find themselves in that position? Is there anyone who, this is like tumbleweed, it's like when you do Guess Who and you flip down, does he have a moustache? Is there anyone in the room who feels they've got a kind of older legacy system that is not fit for purpose and is quite expensive and is a bit creaking? Does anyone feel in that place? Rory, are you allowed to tell us what? He's turned his video off, don't do that, Rory. I always get the fear when someone does that, they're like, I'm off.
I was briefly scrolling because I think my line manager's on the call as well. I just wanted to see if he put his hand up quickly, if it was just me. So, as a housing association, we use quite a robust CRM tool that is quite old, but has quite a lot of tenant information and rent accounts and all the rest of it attached to it. So it's been quite difficult in some ways to integrate some of these no-code systems. We have been using AppSheet as a team, as a means of kind of building evaluation tools. So we all have an app on our mobile phones, and when we run sessions, we kind of just input numbers and data, and that sits in a Google Drive somewhere, but doesn't feed into our CRM because it's just too old, and people are a wee bit scared of us messing with it.
That's really cool. I'd never seen. Actually, it looks amazing. I'd never used it before.
It's quite good. It's just been bought by Google, which is the other thing. So, so it's like many other tools. It's basically a way of building spreadsheets into iPhone apps. So we've built apps that are just for evaluation purposes. So our staff, when they're running courses or workshops, kind of log numbers of participants and any outcomes, and it just sits in a spreadsheet in a drive somewhere, and we kind of run our stats from that.
That's really cool. That's really interesting. Actually, looking at that, just thinking how many uses there'd be for a platform like that. Do you know, it's actually, I was speaking at charity the other day, and I kind of, for 9 out of 10 charity app use cases, probably 9 out of 10 charity apps never need to be built in the first place is probably the kind of key starting point. But actually probably 9 out of 10 case uses, there'll be an off-the-shelf app builder that's going to allow you to achieve the thing that you want to achieve, rather than feeling you need to go and get £40,000 of funding, build an app, and then suddenly find the money every year to keep this app working on iOS and the latest version of Android. that it needs to be a really specific use case. I think, what Rory's just mentioned, the fact that they've managed to build that in-house using an off-the-shelf tool. Okay. Does anyone, out of interest, has anyone in the room built an app and regretted having built it? There's a question. Anyone? Nobody's going to admit it if they have. I'll go look in the page 2, the videos, right? Nobody's going to admit it. There was one actually which I saw, and the charity will remain nameless because it's not their fault, but it was a mental health charity, quite a large one, and they launched an app to fanfare, and basically it kind of did a crappy version of some of the stuff like the kind of mindfulness apps and things like Budify have done quite well. And then it was a year on from it, and they kind of tweeted about it. I was like, oh, I wonder how that app's gone. And I went on, I think it was the Play Store on Google, and it had less than 1,000 downloads a year on. So this app, which has been built from scratch, probably costing tens, maybe potentially even hundreds of thousands of pounds to develop, God knows how much money to maintain. And actually, you probably could have given the people who downloaded that app free counselling for the next year for the amount of people that actually downloaded it. So do think about that cost and that benefit you're actually going to have to your beneficiaries. Is it worth the time sink, or could you build something off the shelf in-house? Okay.
And just following on from that, I haven't ever taken on building my own app in the organisation I work in, because I just think it feels like such a massive headache for very little gain in the cases that I've come across. But it's not always just it's not really just the initial cost and the initial work. It's what you then have to do to keep it up to date across both platforms on an ongoing basis, when they're releasing updates at their own will, and they're not checking in with you about how much that's going to affect how your app works, and that actually starts to become the real headache kind of a year down the line or so. There's the kind of cost that you don't think about up front necessarily. Yeah,
absolutely. I've got a question. So first of all, from Matt. Oh, whose phone's that? Someone's phone's going. Don't know whose phone it is. Max, I've got a question for you. So if people were thinking, so people on the call just now and thinking, where do I even begin with this stuff? What would you say is a sensible starting point for charities wanting to explore this?
I guess, it's a good question, because that's one thing that people struggle with in terms of no code, is just how big it is. And there's seemingly a new no code tool that's coming out every day. So the space is growing at quite a rate and is quite hard to keep track of. So I think for the use cases that we've heard today, it would be Zapier would be your best bet to get started and just play with. And you can do things at the lowest level of simplicity and start to feel the real power of it without really having to do much within the space of about 10 minutes. So I would start playing around with Zapier first and then go from there. And then you can start thinking about apps and all that stuff, because with no code, and as I was saying earlier, you can make disposable apps. Like, you can make apps in a day now and test them out with your users, see if they work, and if they don't, you can scrap them, because it's that quick and easy. So that's a good thing now that sort of rallies against that whole idea of spending £40,000 on a development team to do it for you, and the cost that you're likely to incur later on down the line, as Lizzie was saying. So start with Zapier first, but that may not be right for your use case. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
Brilliant. Jim, you had a question. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, we've got a membership of about 150 member clubs, and we were using an Excel spreadsheet for the database and stuff. Then we got that Salesforce. They gave us a free sort of subscription, but they then said it would be about £7,000 for the training for the Salesforce. So I've never used it, and it's really just to try and get some sort of membership database and to see what was the best one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer for this. What I would say is you don't have massive numbers of users, so that's something to take into consideration. So the tool that I know certainly a lot of smaller membership organisations have used is the one that Russell mentioned, which is Airtable. I am fairly sure like Scottish Mediation Network use Airtable. It's a really simple tool. There's some really nice off-the-shelf charity-specific CRM systems now. Siobhan, there was one mentioned in the last call. A couple of charities in Scotland are using. Do you remember the name of it? Do you remember the name of it, Jen?
Ross, we're looking at Charity Log.
That's the one. There you go. Ooh. Okay, Charity Log. Yeah, Jim, that was the other one that was mentioned. So they're worth looking at. What I would say is Salesforce is a very good, robust system. For some organizations it can be overkill, same with Microsoft Dynamics.
Apparently we looked at Salesforce in the past, it's far too expensive, so I don't know if that's still the same.
Okay, so you get your 10 free... Sorry, are you going?
I've used Insightly quite a few times, and
okay.
it's easy to use.
Okay.
I think my take on it, so Salesforce, you get free licenses for charities, so there is no cost, but it's kind of off the shelf, unless you're using it purely for fundraising, which the not-for-profit system has been developed for, then you'll start wondering, how do I use this? And you'll want a bit of guidance. To me, if you feel as though a spreadsheet's a bit creaky, but you haven't got masses for more, I would have a look at Airtable. You can import a spreadsheet straight into Airtable, and then a very short bit of work from either yourself, if you're comfortable doing the equivalent of mail merging, would be connect that to your Outlook via Zapier, and then you can send any email you want directly to anybody you want, have people filling in forms that change their data, and if you are just doing it as one person, I think it's something like $11 a month.
Brilliant.
Could you use that for membership applications? So at the moment it's a paper application we've got, and then we need to input the data. So with that Airtable, could you set up an online form that they fill in and it populates automatically?
Yes, you can. There are loads of other tools. You know, one of the other things we haven't touched on as much is this is all about the integration stuff. There's stuff around developing websites that can do that sort of thing for you at no cost. So I can share in the chat a website we built in 10 minutes. And if I had 5 minutes more, I could have put a donate page on it. And that's the sort of change in speed that you're able to do. And, you know, I should have said at the start, I've never coded. I never want to code. I don't think I need to learn to code. And if I can book a flight ticket, I can do the things that everybody's talking about. It's not difficult stuff. It needs a little bit of patience, but either someone in your team or a volunteer around you is likely to have the ability to connect these things together.
Yeah. And I guess just to reinforce what Russell said, you'd be better having a member of staff who understood some of the basic principles of UX and who could really understand some of the key ways that someone is going to use the tool rather than how do we build the tool. And so for me, that's where if you've got limited staff time, limited staff budget, it's getting someone to literally buy a couple of books or do an online course over the course of a week to really understand how you're going to build something that's going to be used by people really easily, and what's that going to look like. And one of the tools we mentioned previously on calls is Hotjar. Hotjar has a really nice forms analysis tool in it. So for example, for your membership tool, you could set up Hotjar on your website. You've got your membership form, but actually Hotjar would show you that everyone gets to question 4 and you made question 4 mandatory and it's actually unnecessary, and everyone drops off at that point and you're losing loads of potential members because they hit question 4, nobody likes it, it's nosy, and you're losing loads of traffic. And then you can tweak it so you don't make question 4 mandatory, or you remove it completely, and then suddenly you're converting more people. So that ability to test stuff rapidly can make a huge difference. Insightly, which Iain mentioned, I'll put a link to that in the chat. And what we're seeing now is much more, so CRM systems, I guess, really crudely in 3 categories. So kind of open source and paid for. So open source ones like Civi CRM, which you're still going to have to build yourself and require some technical knowledge. and then the kind of more expensive paid for versions like Salesforce and Dynamics, which are still going to need that technical experience. But then simpler things like Insightly that Iain mentioned, which are low monthly costs. Almost all of these platforms have non-profit pricing as well. One of the ones I like is called NAC, which I'll put the link in. They give, I think it's a 25% discount to charities. Where that tool is really nice is it has modules. So it's got things like a membership module, a fundraising module. It's got like a client feedback module, and just drag and drop the elements you want into your CRM rather than thinking, how do we build this thing from scratch? You can essentially choose the building blocks that are going to be important to you. The other one, which I have not used, but I've heard a lot of charities starting to explore, is called Good CRM, which is specifically built for the charity sector. So I'll put a link to that in there as well. So that's worth exploring. Okay. Quick question. So this one is for Russell, Iain and Lizzie. I'd be interested to know, is there something else that you've identified in your charity where you feel this feels ripe for using a tool like Zapier, it feels ripe for a no-code solution, and that aspirationally is the kind of the next thing that you want to be doing?
Start with that. So I sort of touched on it a little bit before, which is bringing Trello in, which is like it's basically a fancy things to do list, but it's a shared collaboration platform. So what we have discovered by everybody working at home is one of the challenges is knowing who's doing what task and not siphoning off or pigeonholing different jobs to different people, but all being able to chip in. The challenge with that is not knowing who's done what and where you're using shared email boxes and things like that. So we've started connecting all of those systems I talked about and all of the processes into Trello. But the great thing then is to change Trello into the doing bit. So by moving something from one board to another, really visually, by moving it from pending to done, or from column A to column B, can do the task by integrating back through Zapier into everything else. And I think it's almost gamifying work and your admin stuff of being able to move things around in a really visual way, so anyone with access to that can do all of your work without realizing it. And I think that collaboration and knowing what has been done and what hasn't is where I see our next step.
I'm now muted. Sorry, Iain or Lizzie, any from you? I don't know how often I was muted through that and what you caught, but
well, I can go up. I think three things for me. Finance. There's a lot of bits and bobs that I have to do manually around reconciliations and Xero and invoicing and things like that. So I think there's a bit of work around there. There's stuff around some data analysis. There's lots of information that we're getting from these Eventbrite sign-ups and their journey through. That's all me kind of manually downloading stuff and doing pivot tables and things like that. Though I've only done one round of that, the next round I'll do it. So I think there's something in there. And then also when I was rooting around Zapier, there's stuff around marketing. So again, it's that try to understand the customer journey. Where do they come in? And then what's the lifetime value and lots of different things. So yeah, I think there's so much and it can be a bit overwhelming at times. So, and I'm like, let's do everything. So I need to just focus on one thing at a time. I think is my, what I'll be doing.
Cool. Yeah. Lizzie, any from you?
I'm going to be really honest and say no, our heads have only really just stopped spinning from the last 3 months and the various things that we've had to kind of switch our attention to. So there isn't anything kind of immediately that we are thinking of working on next in this vein anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'd be interesting actually the amount of organisations where a lot of these processes are very office-based and now not having access to an office. Like, what do those processes look like beyond COVID? So there's one actually, this is a purely selfish thing, and I'm looking for the group for help here. So there's a really cool tool called Donut. I don't know if anyone's come across this. So this is a tool that integrates with Slack. So if you've got a community on Slack, this is a really simple tool that is about connecting up colleagues. So the idea behind it is it will randomly pair people up. So it can pair people up into groups, so it can pair people up one-to-one. And it's used a lot kind of as an HR function, so that when a new member of staff joins the team, you'd be randomly paired up with someone and you get an introduction to people across the team. So a really nice tool, but it can be used in lots of different ways. So I think, I don't know if that Jane, not Jane, is she on the call? There was someone on the call who's been using it and she's gone. Anyway, I'd be quite interested. It is hideously expensive for what is a very, very simple tool. So I think it's something like $50 a month per user, which is bonkers. And so from my point of view, I think it could be quite an interesting way of, if you had a community like this and it was on Slack, so SCVO managed some communities like this, that ability to join two charities together and do that on a kind of random basis and get them to talk to each other. So if anyone knows a quick and dirty DIY way of doing that, Max, I'm basically looking at you, then do let me know, because I'm quite keen to know how that would work without spending $50 per user per month. That'd be quite nice. Okay. Sorry, you go, Max.
Yeah, I can follow up with you after on that one. I think there are some quicker, cheaper, easy ways to do it. Because I've tried to use Donut and yeah, similarly came across the price tag. So. Yeah. You get the free version, which is up to 24 people. I don't know who has got a Slack channel that's got 24 people in it, but anyway. So, cool, grand. Right, that's my own selfish way of finishing a call. I want to find a thing that costs a lot of money. Someone get me it for free. Any final questions for our speakers? We've still got a wee bit of time before we finish up. Rory, do you want to jump back in?
I have a very quick one, just based on your chat about UX design. That's one of the things that I have kind of crashed my way through with AppSheet, is to build an app and realize people don't answer questions the way I think they're going to answer questions, and then go back and rebuild it and do all that sort of stuff. Have you any recommendations of books to read? Because going on from last week's about good service design, I really enjoyed that book. Just wondering if there's any around UX design.
Okay. Anyone, any UX book recommendations before There's quite a few. Do you know the ones I prefer are the ones that have actual examples. This sounds ridiculous, but a lot of the UX books are quite theoretical, and it will show you theoretical user interfaces. But actually, there's a few out there that have, so it pulls out real world examples from actual sites. If you give me a wee second, I will quickly find you one, because I bookmarked one the other day. Give me a wee second. Right, I will put one in. Oh yeah, so here's a good one actually. It's not a book so much, but there's one on design systems that was on GitHub. There's a really good thing actually. There's a good blog post which the Co-op wrote recently. I don't know if you saw it, which I'll ping in as well, which is talking about using behavior modes rather than user stories. So it's about thinking about what is someone's need and what's their situation at a specific point in time, rather than this is Jim, Jim is 51, Jim is a civil servant, Jim needs to do this. It's more about thinking about people's lives as being much more flexible and how they build that into their user experience. So that's quite a good one to look. I'm conscious you asked about a specific book. I will follow up, and there's a couple of books I've got bookmarked, and I'll ping them over to you, Rory, and I'll get you those. But yeah, I think for me that's a much more sensible. Don't Make Me Think, that's one from Amy. Yeah, that's a really good book on user testing. So the Steve Krug book, really, really simple, and it's got kind of practical step-by-step user testing that you can do. A really nice book. I think it was, what's the other one that he wrote? Rocket Surgery Made Easy is another book that he wrote, which is really good. And most of these things you can do in-house to a certain degree. And I think for me, that's the ethos, is bringing in people when you really need it, rather than thinking we want to do a thing, an aspiration that we want to do, and we can't do it until we go and get the funding to go and make it happen. Is actually there'll be sunk costs in your organisation right now. So whether it's that big hulking system that Russell spoke about, or it could be something that you've got, there's £100 a month subscription on some tool that hardly ever gets used anymore, but it was purchased 5 years ago. Maybe it's time to ditch that. The one that always gets me is the amount of charities that have a server in a cupboard and all the server runs is Sage, and it's got a very clunky old version of Sage in it, and you spend thousands of pounds to an IT support company just to keep that server in the cupboard running. It's going to fall over in about 2 years' time. You're going to have to pay for another server. Is actually removing that, moving a cloud-based tool like Zero that Iain mentioned, actually there's a potential big cost saving, maybe just sitting there waiting to be made in your organisation. Okay, right. Siobhan, any final thoughts from you, or any points from SCVO that you want to kind of pick up?
So yes, thank you for all the speakers. That was like really useful, and really good that everybody knows to just like go and start with Zapier and just go step by step and take one step at a time and not try and do everything all at once. So that's really useful for everyone. So this was the first time we used closed caption subtitles, so I'd just like some feedback from you all on those. So in the chat box, could you all just type now, yes, if you found them helpful, no, if you found them unhelpful, or just unused if you did use them at all. That would be really useful for us just to get some quick feedback in the chat. And then once you've done that, we do try and tailor all the topics on our DigiShifts to things that you would find helpful. So can you just type in now, like, what's your one biggest headache that your charity's facing just now? What's your biggest digital blocker? And just have a think about that and pop that in the chat box as well. I've put in a link to one of our upcoming DigiShifts because Rory specifically asked about accessibility and user experience. So we have a DigiShift on that on the 14th of July, but we have a few DigiShifts scheduled just before then. So I'll pop in the details of those and the link to where you can register. And obviously we'll add some more onto the chat. As Ross mentioned, all of our DigiShifts are made into podcasts and they're all available on the SCVO website. I'm just putting the link for that in now as well. And the recently published how-to guides that I mentioned at the top of the session. And also all the recordings of these DigiShifts are on Third Sector Lab's Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. And the final thing I'd like to tell you about is the Never More Needed campaign. So some of you might have already seen that. So it's a UK-wide campaign, and it's basically to raise awareness of how essential the third sector is, especially now, and to help remind government and our funders and our donors and the general public of all the great work that you're all doing, how essential that is, and that it is never more needed than right now. So if you're sharing anything on Twitter, add the hashtag #NeverMoreNeeded. But also our news team, Third Force News, would love to write features on all of you. If you have a story to tell about why your service is never more needed just now. So you can get in touch with them. Again, I'll pop a link in the chat. And the same team send out a bulletin every week of all the third sector events across Scotland. So if you have an event coming up, you can submit it to them and they'll pop that into their bulletin.